Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on the impact of artificial intelligence on law enforcement, which is being organized in partnership with Eurojust, the European Judicial and Cybercrime Network, and also with UniCRE. We will learn a bit more about all these organizations soon, but let me just share some housekeeping rules for the webinar. So, Ikran, if you could have the slide up, please. For the speakers, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. And for all the participants, please add any questions that you may have in the small Q&A button that you will see at the bottom of your screen. And the panelists will monitor this, and we at UNESCO will also monitor this to share these questions with the moderator. And then there will be an opportunity to address those. For those who want to follow the webinar in English and in Spanish, there is a globe icon at the bottom. So you may select the language that you prefer. While most of our speakers on the panel are going to speak in English, but we also have one panelist who will be speaking in Spanish. So even those who are joining and listening to in English, please select the English channel below. And we will also share these details in writing in the chat. And I think with that out of the way, so we can start our webinar. Ikran, if we can take the screen down. Yeah. So hi. So I am Prateek Sibal. I am a program specialist at UNESCO, and I lead the work on artificial intelligence and the rule of law at the organization. And this webinar series is our second series. We did a series last year, and this is a series on AI and the rule of law. We have been working at UNESCO with the judiciary for about 10 years on issues related to freedom of expression, access to information, and safety of journalists. And since about 2018 and 2019, we've started working on artificial intelligence as well. So this webinar is being organized as part of this work. Through this work on AI and the rule of law, we have reached about 5,000 judicial operators. When I say judicial operators, it's judges, lawyers, prosecutors, civil servants in legal administration, researchers in over 140 countries over the past couple of years, mainly through massive open online courses. And the link to the course on AI and the rule of law that we launched in 7 languages in 2022 will be shared with you in the chat. We have developed a capacity building toolkit called the Global Toolkit on AI and the Rule of Law, which is also available in English, French, and Spanish for institutions, law schools to use and adapt it. And we have the privilege of having the author of this toolkit, Dr. Miriam Stankovic, as the moderator for this session. Coming to this session, the issue of human rights and AI is of extreme importance to UNESCO, but also to the global conversations around AI governance. And law enforcement is one of the key aspects where AI systems are being used, whether it's in facial recognition systems, which may be deployed in public spaces, or it is in actually predictive policing, where there are issues related to bias and discrimination. Then there are issues around what does responsible innovation in AI in the law and justice sector look like? And these will be some of the issues that we'll be exploring with a stellar, if I may say, a star cast of panelists that we have with us today. But before we do that, I would like to invite our partner organizations to share their opening remarks. So let me invite Prosecutor Pedro Verdelho from the EJCN to share his opening words with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prateek. It will be brief because really it's just to introduce, as you said, the partner organization. Good afternoon before everything. Good afternoon to everyone. Maybe afternoon, evening, morning, you never know with these nowadays webinars. This is indeed a webinar, a joint event, UNESCO AJCN. AJCN stands for European Judicial Cybercrime Networks. We are very happy to join UNESCO on this initiative for the reasons you already emphasized. You already mentioned the importance of artificial intelligence in criminal investigations and in the criminal scene anywhere. And we are a network of practitioners. I mean, a network of people that is professionally involved in the judiciary in investigating cybercrime and gathering digital evidence. We cover most of the European Union, not all, but most of the European Union countries, member states, and also several observers, such as our neighbors from Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Serbia, Ukraine, Iceland, and also the United States and Japan. And one of the most important lines of action of the AGCN is exactly training, spreading the message. This area of cybercrime, this area of gathering digital evidence that is much broader than cybercrime, because you may need to obtain digital evidence in potentially any kind of criminal investigation nowadays. And with artificial intelligence, everything changed. So this area, I was saying, is first quite complex for lawyers, for practitioners from judiciary. So we need to share the message. We need to spread the message to share knowledge. And secondly, it's quite evolutive, so evolves every day. Every day you find new things. Every day you find new phenomena. Every day you find new criminal methods. This is the reason why training and sharing information is one of the biggest lines of action of AGCN. So we are very happy to share this initiative. We are very happy to associate ourselves to this webinar, to this event. And also, we are very happy that a number of our colleagues from the AGCN are there in the list of participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And as you mentioned, being a practitioner and AGCN being a practitioner network, we actually have a mix in the panelists as well. It's a mix between researchers, practitioners to bring out this diverse perspective. With that, I would hand over the floor to Irakli Beridze from UNICRI. Over to you, Irakli.
Thank you very much, Pratik, and my greetings from The Hague to all the participants of this webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank and commend the lead of the UNESCO for organizing this series of webinars, and we're happy to join. I'm also would like to send my greetings to the co-partners, co-organizers of this event, European Judiciary Cybercrime Network, as well as the Eurojust. My name is Irakli Beridze. I'm head of the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics for UNICRI. Our center is operating out from The Hague, the Netherlands. It is one of the earlier UN initiatives in the area of artificial intelligence. We started our work back in 2014-15, opening our center in The Hague in 2017. And our main focus of operation is artificial intelligence vis-a-vis crime prevention, criminal justice, rule of law, and human rights. And we are directly operating in the area of AI and law enforcement. AI, from its technical point of view, as well as the policy point of view, has exponentially grown over the last number of years. And now we reach the point where governance of AI has become one of the top priorities for the United Nations, as well as all its member states, or at least most of them as well. We've seen accelerated amount of a number of events and undertakings taken place within the United Nations, being its Secretary General's creation of the advisory board, which will by this summer will come up with the suggestive mechanism of governance of AI in general, as well as summits like the AI Safety, UK AI Safety Summit, or other undertakings which has taken place recently. And only a few weeks ago, European Commission and European Union adopted an AI Act, as well as first legislative act governing artificial intelligence. Law enforcement is probably one of the most sensitive applications of AI, and governance of the AI within the law enforcement area is probably one of the most important or most vital and practical issues that collectively international community should tackle. Our center has been sort of in a centerpiece of coming up with the governance instrument related to the AI and law enforcement, and we've been working hand in hand with Interpol, starting in 2017, when we created global meetings on AI for law enforcement, and later on joined with the European Commission, have been first engaged in a long process of drafting a specialized toolkit, which we call it responsible innovation in the law enforcement. And in short, I always call it responsible use of AI by law enforcement. The toolkit itself was launched last summer at the Science Conference of Interpol in Singapore, and later on being tested in 15 different agencies across the world. And after receiving the feedbacks, we have relaunched the toolkit on the 22nd of February at the 4th global meeting on AI and law enforcement. Toolkit also has its own electronic version, a website, and my colleague Ines, who will be one of the panelists, will introduce details of the toolkit as well. Now, just very briefly, the toolkit which we launched is a extremely practical but very comprehensive document. It is meant for all 193 UN member states, and the next iterations of the project, which we will be starting from a few months from now and for a number of years ahead of us, we will be helping UN member states to adopt the toolkit for their national purposes. We'll help countries to, and we will mentor and help the countries. We will provide technical as well as capacity building assistance for them to translate this for the national needs, to translate them into their standard operational procedures and simply adopt it. It's a very comprehensive document. It was an extremely inclusive process of developing such a toolkit. We had the stakeholders from all possible interested parties, including the law enforcement, government representatives, private sector, academia, civil society, even the public opinions have been taken into account so that everybody's voice should have been heard into developing such a sensitive and at the same time practical documentation. With this, I once again thank UNESCO and our co-organizers for enabling to having this webinar, and we would be very happy to engage with each one of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irakli, and importantly for sharing those tools, which are also in the chat. So we invite you to look at these tools as well. With that, I would now hand over the floor to Dr. Miriam Stankovic, who will be our moderator for the day, to take us forward. Over to you, Miriam.
Thanks. Thank you, Pratik. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us from various parts of the world. Today's discussion promises to be enlightening as we delve into the complexity and advancements of AI in law enforcement. Our webinar is structured to explore specific use cases and ethical considerations of AI in law enforcement. It will provide insights also on balancing innovation with regulation, as Pratik mentioned. And finally, we'll conclude with hopefully a dynamic Q&A session during which and throughout this webinar, we encourage you to participate and pose questions to our experts. Now, let me introduce you briefly to our esteemed panelists. We have Jake Efodu, an assistant professor at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law at Toronto Metropolitan University. He specializes in international human rights and technology law with a keen focus on the ethical implications of surveillance and predictive policing. We also have Ines Ferreira, an associate program officer at the Center for Robotics at UNICRI. Ines is involved in projects that assess the impact of robotics and AI on security and law enforcement, bringing a unique perspective on responsible innovation. We are also joined by Nishi Dixit, an advocate of the Supreme Court of India and a renowned cyber law expert. With extensive experience in cybercrime and digital forensics, Nishi brings a critical understanding of the role of AI in the legal processes within Indian law enforcement. And last but not least, we have Sebastian Weisbrod, a programmer and a teaching fellow of tech law at the University of Buenos Aires. His work focuses on the intersection of technology and law, particularly how AI is reshaping law enforcement practices in Latin America. Now, each expert will share their insights on AI's current applications and future implications in law enforcement. And then followed by a discussion on the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. With that, let's begin our exploration into the world of AI and criminal justice. And we start with exploring use cases of artificial intelligence in law enforcement. And Ines, I'm curious, and we're curious for you to highlight some of the most prominent use cases of AI in law enforcement that you know of, including uses in investigation processes and examples of where such AI tools have been deployed. In particular, we would like to hear more about how AI has been utilized in evidence gathering and analysis. Ines, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, UNESCO and the partners for inviting us to participate in this interesting conversation. So starting off with the landscape of usage of AI in law enforcement. As the head of our center described in his opening remarks, we've been working on this for quite a while now, and we have observed an increasing uptake of AI in the law enforcement sector. So the trend is that law enforcement agencies are using more and more AI systems. And the field has evolved quite a lot in the past years to an extent that AI systems are increasingly specialized and they can, be better at a broad range of applications, from text analysis, speech analysis, identification of objects and persons of interest in photos and videos, etc. So in terms of prominent applications, there's really a wide range of use cases out there in the real world. We have a lot of knowledge in the area of child abuse and exploitation investigations. We have another project, the AI for Safer Children initiative, in which we have collected information on about 80 tools that exist on the market to support investigations of these type of crimes. And some examples are AI tools that analyze evidence in or analyze videos and pictures in devices of suspects that are apprehended during investigations. And they support officers, investigators in identifying materials that contain or are likely to contain child abuse depictions. There's also AI systems that use natural language processing to go through messages and chat applications in these devices, and they can also support investigators in identifying evidence of grooming or other practices committed in these crimes. Then, of course, outside of the area of child abuse and exploitation, computer vision is used broadly in facial recognition systems that are adopted by law enforcement agencies across the world. For example, also license plate recognition systems are used, so they can support officers in identifying vehicles more quickly through these images that have license plate depictions. There's really a lot. There's speech analysis also to identify the age of people that are recorded in certain audio files that are collected. Machine learning techniques have also been really good in improving techniques of fingerprint matching or DNA sequencing, also in the course of investigation. So there's really a wide range of applications that can be used by law enforcement in their investigations to collect evidence and also to analyze evidence that was obtained in investigations and then use it to prosecute crimes.
Thank you, Ines, for this overview of the most prominent use cases of AI in law enforcement. We go to Jake, and building on what Ines just explained and gave a brief overview of the use cases of AI in law enforcement. Jake, can you provide examples of AI applications in surveillance and predictive policing that you know of? And we know that the use of AI in law enforcement should be in compliance with international human rights principles and international human rights law. AI systems feed on data. We have the right to privacy, access to information, freedom of expression. as well that are also prominent in this situation and need to be taken into consideration. So how can we ensure that AI technologies are used ethically and in compliance with human rights principles? So which human rights principles are at stake here when AI is being used by law enforcement agencies? Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and I want to thank UNESCO for this very important webinar, as well as UNICRI, Eurojust, and the EJCN. I think this is a very, very fundamental conversation. As Ines mentioned, there is a geometric progression in the rise of the use of AI by law enforcement and by government, but more importantly, in tandem is a rise in terms of the human rights abuses. And when you ask me which of the human rights laws are being violated, I would say literally all of them, from the right to life, the freedom of movement, to freedom from discrimination. We've seen literally every single fundamental human rights, from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ICCPR, the ICSCR, the European Convention, the Charter. All the laws get implicated by the use of these surveillance technologies. And maybe I could, talk about some of these use cases. If we think about how facial recognition is used by law enforcement in China and even South Africa, or we think about the way AI systems are used to monitor body language, to monitor the gates, the crowd dynamics of people at the airports, or people in social, public spaces in London, UK, in New York, in US, in Nairobi, Kenya. This constant monitoring, this social media monitoring, definitely implicates a lot of rights and a lot of freedoms. In fact, one thing it does around a lot of young population today is that it promotes this sense of self-censorship. Even when people are doing nothing wrong, when they have no intention to commit any crime, they are impacted in ways that they cannot freely express themselves. They are constantly shutting themselves down. And we see how this impacts on their mental health, on their sense of self. People are constantly wearing facial marks so that they don't get tracked by facial recognition software. And it's ridiculous that we should be living in a time where more human rights are protected, but we're living in a times where human rights actually clamped down, especially by the people who are meant to protect and enforce them. I'll give one very simple example based on some of the work that we've done, especially around surveillance technology. So Nigeria is, for example, one of the largest customers of digital surveillance purchasing. And we looked at in the last decade, the country has spent $2.7 billion on contracts with US, China, Australia, EU, and even UK-based companies in what we will call a decade-long surveillance spending spree. So we see how they've acquired all kinds of surveillance technologies that can intercept the internet, that intercept mobile technology, social media monitoring, biometric identification, extraction. And we see that, over time, the use of these tools have been able to sort of affect the ranges of rights, from data protection rights to impeding on personal spaces. And just like Ines talked about the license plate recognition, a lot of these surveillance use cases violate a lot of the individual rights and spaces that are meant to be protected by the state. I could also talk about some of the predictive policing use cases, which are very, very critical today, whereby people are using AI systems to hotspots where crime might likely happen. So what they do is they use historical crime data and they combine it with some demographic information to see if they can identify areas with a high likelihood of criminal activity. And in reality, from all the various research we've done in literally all the countries that use predictive policing, we've seen how it has perpetuated bias, it has coveted investigatory privilege, there's a lack of transparency in these tools, and there's a complete inherent unreliability of the technology, raising so many concerns in international human rights law and international human rights standards. So countries like Canada, for example, the Supreme Court of Canada has said that there is no mathematical formula, there is no scientific algorithmic formula to determine what is a just or an appropriate way to predict crime. Anything predictive literally bases a lot on pseudoscience than on reality. And so therefore, the increase in use of surveillance technology, use of predictive technology for criminal justice has literally been the fulcrum of the biggest issue right now when it comes to criminal justice across all the countries that we've researched in the last 10 years.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Jake, for sharing these insights. Very important to highlight that the use of deployment of AI in the justice system and in law enforcement, and especially for predictive policing, comes with a number of challenges, and we need digital safeguards. And we can talk later about what these digital safeguards look like in order to protect against abuses and violations of human rights. We continue we continue to delve into all these issues. And Nishit, you come from India. Can you share some insights on how AI has been deployed in the law enforcement process in India, and in what ways AI affects the adjudication process before the judiciary in India? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, UNESCO, for inviting me in this session, and thank you, participants, for joining today's session. So the challenge is whether we are ready to combat these AI crimes. So the challenge is how to prevent these crimes, how to prosecute these crimes, whether we are able to combat these AI algorithm profile crimes, because criminals use these like algorithms to convince victims and also to select which individuals and groups of people may be easily wealthy targets. Criminals can select potential victims. Also, money mules for the laundering of criminal profits can be recruited in this way. So both criminals and law enforcement are increasingly making use of the opportunities that AI may offer. So the challenge is the AI-enabled crimes of high concern, like if you have deep fake cases, driverless vehicles as weapon, tailored phishing cases, disrupting AI control systems, large-scale blackmail cases. You have AI-authored fake news cases. So how to combat these cases? The law enforcement agencies are using some tools, but whether they are whether they can produce the evidence before the court. What about the admissibility and authenticity of these type of documents and electronic evidence before the court of law? So the challenge regarding prosecution and how defense can produce these documents, how to get these evidence forensically examined. So whether forensic capability we have. So these are some questions. Then we have some in AI-enabled recent cases of moderate concern, that is misuse of military robots, snake oil, data poisoning cases we have, like denial of access to online activities, like we have, and then tricking face recognition. So we have so many cases regarding face swapping and like voice cloning cases. How to prove these type of cases before the court of law? That's very important part. Now, the low concern AI-enabled crimes are like evading AI detection, AI-authored fake reviews we have. So these are some important cases to how to prevent, how to investigate these type of cases, like AI enhanced phishing attacks. We have AI powered malware. We have deep fake attacks. Then we have automated bot attacks. Also, we have adversarial attacks in AI systems. So attackers can exploit vulnerabilities in AI system by feeding them manipulated input data to deceive or manipulate the AI's decision making process. So you can say garbage in, garbage out. You can say bias in, bias out also. So how to prove these type of cases? This is really upcoming challenges we have. So AI-based data breaches, we have AI-enabled insider threats. Also, we have insider with access to AI system, or data can misuse AI tools or exploit AI-generated insights for malicious purposes. AI-driven financial frauds we have. Now we are receiving so many calls AI-driven robocalls we have cases. So deepfake technology can facilitate various criminal activities, including like harassing or humiliating individual online, like perpetrating extortion cases we have, facilitating documenting frauds we have, supporting the narratives of extremist or terrorist groups we have. So falsifying or manipulating electronic evidence for criminal justice investigation is a challenge. So like infodemic cases we have, how to prove, how to investigate these cases. So the tools we have, no, we are not able to crack these types of cases, because which technology they have used, which website they have used, because to get information from these websites, from these intermediaries, it's a Herculean task because they have different laws. They are not providing the information. So to first, you have to gather the information from these websites or these tools. So how to use these tools? These are some important challenges regarding. We have fake deep videos. We have regarding cases of like image swapping, also fake AI voice cases. We have like in New Delhi, we have a case of cyber criminals dupe man by using AI voice cloning technology to fake his relatives kidnapping. So we have so many cases registered in India also, where people are calling like means like that means your child has been kidnapped and just they are extorting that person. So these are some cases we are facing in India also and worldwide also. So AI and WhatsApp frauds also. Recently we have you have like means AI and CEO frauds. A voice deepfake was used to scam like a chief executive officer. It is the first noted instance of an artificial intelligence generated voice deepfake used in scam. So these are some important cases. So to tackle these type of cases, first we have to be careful about the understanding of the crime, how they committed this type of crime, what technology they have used, what tools they are using, because so many tools we have like deepfake detector tools. We have Sanitel, we have like Intel real-time deepfake detector, we have V-Verify, we have Microsoft Video Authenticator tool we have. But these criminals are very smart because they know the digital trickery. So a critical problem, you can say, when a researcher developed an algorithm to track inconsistent eye blinking in deepfake, shortly after the researcher published their findings on the detection method, new algorithms to include more normal eye blinking were developed and the detection method was obsolete. So this is the important, it's a Tom and Jerry case, you can say. So these are some important challenges, and to prove before the courts, it's really a Herculean task because again, you have the source, but what about the authenticity of these electronic evidence? These are some important challenges we are facing before court of law.
Thank you, Nishit, for highlighting these predicaments. And we know that AI is not an ordinary, software. So, not an ordinary technologies. It evolves, especially if self-learning algorithms are involved. So this poses challenges to prosecutors. And law enforcement agencies that deal with digital forensics, how to identify and how to ascertain the authenticity of the AI generated evidence or the use of AI as evidence. So we go on to Sebastian. Sebastian, your work is really interesting. I know that you will talk about a legal case instituted in Buenos Aires against the use of facial recognition technology, and I look forward to hearing more about the specifics of this case. What are some of the major challenges regarding the use of AI in investigation and law enforcement, according to your experience, especially as it relates to facial recognition? So, Sebastian, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to be speaking in Spanish. I'd like to begin by thanking UNESCO for inviting me to come along and speak. I represent the Argentinian Digital Law Observatory, and it's a great opportunity for those of us who are on the technological side to meet together with those on the law enforcement and legal side. And we can talk about some of the cases that we've seen in Buenos Aires, especially using facial recognition technology. Let me just give you the backdrop on this. Argentina right now is going through a crisis. Last year, we had the second highest inflation in the world, 220% annual inflation. The poverty level is now at 50%. That means 50% of the people in the country live, they do not get enough money every month to make ends meet, to pay for the basic human services, health, education. And this year, we're also looking at a sharp drop in GDP. Now, I know there are lots of people from all over the world around here in this discussion, but it's important for you to understand what's going on in Argentina, to understand this case and the work that we've been doing. Law enforcement agencies have a much tougher job right now than when times are good, right? If you've ever been through a crisis in your country, you know what I'm talking about. So, and the types of crime levels that you see varies, especially when a country falls into a deep economic crisis. So now, I just haven't given you that specific background about what's going on in Argentina. I could now move on to this case. Now, AI. I am a programmer, statistics. I'm an expert in statistics and AI is based on the complexity of statistics, probabilities. And as Pedro said at the beginning, this is something that's constantly changing. Law enforcement agencies are limited because they're not just dedicated, focused solely on statistics. And so sometimes they're limited in what they can manage to do. Now, in this case, what we see is what they're using. Miriam was mentioning this. They use facial recognition technology, mainly. Oh, they'll use the license plate recognition technologies, and that can be to a certain extent effective. They've managed to have some arrests, bring people in on arrest warrants. Oh, they saw people driving around without license plates, and that's something that raises eyebrows because that's illegal, and that leads to think that this might be somebody who's about to commit a crime, right? But obviously, the main priorities we face in Argentina are different because of the dire economic crisis we're enduring. Now, beyond law enforcement and policing proper, there are other government agencies that are perhaps more used to having massive data processing skills, and they have perhaps a more sophisticated way of managing all of the data out there, and they're perhaps a bit more conversant with AI systems. For example, the Social Security system, the tax system and tax authorities. These are government agencies that are used to managing massive amounts of statistics, and money. But one of the things that's common in Argentina is that we don't necessarily have the tools that we need to detect fraud. And this applies not just to the tax authorities, but also to Social Security. And so a lot of people manage to get through the cracks. You know, it's hard to come up with profiles of the most specific types of activities because these public administrations don't have the wherewithal to go through each and every single case with a fine-tooth comb. But in any event, perhaps afterwards, when we talk about this later on, we can talk about the use of facial recognition technology in Buenos Aires and the case that we launched, and we can talk about that in greater detail if you want.
Yes, please. We would like to hear more about this legal case that you instituted in Buenos Aires against the use of facial recognition technology. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. Thanks.
Right now or a bit later on?
Yes, a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, great. In 2018, the city of Buenos Aires announced that they're going to be introducing facial recognition technology for people who are on the lam, people who've fled the law. Not people who necessarily have escaped from prison. I mean, those people too, but basically people who were supposed to go to court and didn't show up, or any other type of thing where somebody's supposed to be at a certain place at a certain time and they're not there. And so Buenos Aires announced that they were going to be introducing this system. And civil society was really taken aback, surprised. There was no prior impact study. There was no law on the books that authorized this. There was no prior debate. Just boom, they announced it. And of course, this overnight change has a direct impact on people's human rights. And so we launched proceedings in a civil case. First of all, we asked information about how the system was going to work. We filed a Freedom of Information Act or a FOIA motion. we didn't get a lot of answers. We really had to come back and insist. They wouldn't share much information. They really were dragging their heels. So as a result of that, we decided to introduce a motion to stay the implementation of this because of the threat that it constituted to fundamental human rights, right? Now, the system worked like this. A public agency called CONARC, which is the database for all of these people with outstanding warrants, right? All you have to do is file a request there. But they don't use biometric information. Rather, they would have to take that information and transfer it to the Central National Registry of people's biometric data in order to gather that information. And then, with all of the cameras that were installed in the region of Buenos Aires, one of these people could be recognized if they're walking down the street. Now, this gave rise to many problems. First of all, the system itself was deficient. The people who were supposed to be making all this work were completely ill-prepared to work with this kind of system. And the UN Human Rights Observer came in and looked at this and said that there were all sorts of different data entry deficiencies, things that jeopardize people's rights, all because of this faulty AI system. Then we entered into the field of proportionality of risk. And this is one of the things that's going to come up in the Q&A session, I think. What is the level of acceptable risk? And what we've said is that even if these people have a warrant out from them, they're not necessarily a threat to society. And at the same time that you're installing a system of massive surveillance of the entire population, in case there might be some issue with security, these things happen actually quite frequently, and this threatens everybody, not just people who are under warrant or an arrest warrant. So the current government wanted to use this to recognize people's faces if there were public demonstrations against the government. People who were protesting against cutting back on their Social Security benefits, things that they've been entitled to, something that really is devastating for so many people in the country, and they wanted to protest. Another problem is bias. AI can be biased, and we put this in our claim as well. And on that, we stressed that point of bias a lot. And here the judge recognized that this could give rise to a real problem. And now we're in a new stage of executing the next step, which is how can we prove that this system jeopardizes our rights and doesn't have any, how can we prove that it doesn't have any bias against minorities? And it's something that's just impossible to prove because these systems all have inbuilt bias because there is no pure system, perfect, one that has full impartiality. They're all based around making choices based on patterns and bias, right? And there's another set of problems. The state signed a contract with a private company. It's a foreign company that has copyright, so we don't really know how it works. And while they are having an impact on human rights, they're doing this through a private company, and we don't know what they're doing with our public information or our private information. And so there's also that problem of national sovereignty. So these were the main arguments in our claim, and now we're trying to do the impossible, the David and Goliath move, to try to prove that this system is so imperfect that it has to be disconnected. And now the city has to be able to prove that the system doesn't have any bias against minorities, etc., before they're going to be able to use it again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for presenting this case. And I think that digital strategic litigation in digital human rights is really important, and the work that you're doing is really important. And I would like to address Jake. And I understand that you have done some work on implementation of data protection laws. Sebastian mentioned data protection, data privacy, bias of facial recognition, bias embedded in facial recognition systems. And also opacity. Okay, so these systems not being transparent, and law enforcement agencies and government entities working with private sector companies. Our data ends God knows where. These technologies, if deployed correctly, could open up opportunities. But if not, they open up a can of worms. And we need to know how to safeguard against violations of privacy, violations of cybersecurity, information security, and how to implement digital safeguards against digital surveillance undertaken by government agencies. So if you could, Jake, discuss this in your experience in Nigeria. Please, can you expand on the situation of surveillance and also highlight the key arising concerns that are applicable to data protection vis-a-vis use of AI for law enforcement, building on what just Sebastian shared about the situation of using facial recognition technology in Buenos Aires. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in the last 7 years, we've seen almost like a different understanding around what law enforcement means. So from research carried on in like over 13 countries, we're seeing that law enforcement agents are having a misunderstanding of their role to maintain public safety and order and enforce laws. And we're seeing more a redefinition around the need to know literally what every citizen is doing at every time, and the need to sort of take effect or to take action on things that are literally not crime related. So from an international legal perspective, these principles absolutely matter. And I think if we're going to ensure that we want to ensure an ethical or a compliant human rights principles to guide surveillance technologies, the first is about data privacy principles, right? Where we need to think about the lawfulness of this technology. And I think this starts with some form of disclosure, where law enforcement agents must disclose what the technology will do, why it is deployed, and how it will ensure this data protection principles of fairness, of transparency, of also data minimization, and also data accuracy. Seeing fully well, like Sebastian said, for a lot of Black people, their faiths are seen to be very similar to one another, because the people who develop these technologies do not use a lot of representative data sets. And there are tons of cases in the US and the UK, including in like Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, where people have been misrepresented, misdiagnosed, misprofiled. They've been arrested, some of them still detained, because a computer AI system was not able to differentiate several faces of like similar looking Black individuals. So in terms of the integrity, the confidentiality, the accountability in terms of using these technologies matter very critically. So I think there's an obligation with law enforcement to ensure that they are carrying out some lawful purpose, because sometimes the best AI is no AI. Instances where we could intervene with like social welfare initiatives or community-based intervention are completely replaced with huge amounts of money buying these big technological tools that end up hampering on the rights of individuals. So if we look at, Article 17 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, we look at Article 16 of the Universal Declaration, and literally even constitutional principles that talk about the right for citizens to be informed when these tools are used. In all 16 countries where we've profiled, most of these tools are bought in secrecy. For example, Nigeria is buying tools from Israel, from UK, from the US. On that, you have to literally go through very critical analysis or investigation to understand that these tools have been informed. Citizens need to be informed that these tools exist, that they are being used, and they need to be informed on what forms of rectification are available when harms occur from the use of these by law enforcement. There's also the need for to restrict data processing. There's also the need to ensure that rights are enforced to be forgotten. Individuals have a right to say, I do not want to be surveilled by an AI system. I have a right to not to be tracked or recognized by facial recognition technology. These things are sort of embedded in international human rights law and standards. Even the GDPR in Article 25 talks about privacy by design. So these technological tools should be embedded with fundamental principles that protect citizens' rights. These are the basic. It's completely basic to say, I do not want these technology tools used on me. I have a right to be informed. I have a right to remedy. I have a right to not have my personal data and information stored in these data sets that are used to profile individuals and the rest of that. So I think there's need for education within law enforcement. There's need for disclosure. And I think more importantly, since we're dealing with an algorithmic tool, we need to ensure that the data sources used for this technology are trained on AI models that have been reviewed by independent stakeholders and experts. And I think when it comes to the performance, the accuracy of these systems, predictive policing reports must ensure that it provides the ability for contestation. Like Sebastian said, you cannot use an intellectual property protected device that cannot be questioned. How do you put intellectual property protection over the fundamental human rights protection of citizens of the country? So we need to rethink the modus operandi around how we use these tools and who we are using them for to achieve what purposes.
Thank you, Jake, for these insights. And we move on to Ines. Ines, your organization, UNICRI, has published a toolkit on responsible innovation in law enforcement. What would you highlight as the key considerations and challenges in the use of AI in law enforcement based on the discussion that we already had? All these, violations of human rights, possibility of violating, a wide array of human rights that are protected by international human rights law instruments, and especially data privacy, access to information, freedom of expression. How do we fight against these challenges? What are the safeguards that we need? Are they already there? Are there any frameworks that we need to take into consideration? Ines, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you to all my co-esteemed panelists for the very interesting and illustrative overview that you've presented. The Toolkit for Responsible AI Innovation in Law Enforcement recognizes both the opportunities that artificial intelligence presents in the sector of law enforcement, and also what I've explained in my first intervention, the idea that law enforcement agencies are increasingly uptaking this type of technology, while also recognizing the risks and the challenges that come with it. And one of the main points or starting points of our AI toolkit is to explain to all sorts of audiences within the law enforcement sector essential concepts in human rights, ethics, and also in artificial intelligence, to equip practitioners, regardless of their level of experience in any of these fields, with just essential concepts and language to talk about all of these issues. And we explain the relationship between the characteristics that make AI systems so powerful and also the challenges that they present. So we highlight that the reliance on the modern AI systems in vast amounts of data and the capability that they have through machine learning techniques of extracting outputs and insights from enormous amounts of data does present a lot of advantages and has a lot of potential in uncovering important insights and criminally relevant information that would otherwise become unknown, but also presents the issues that were already here described of susceptibility of these AI systems of incorporating biases, human biases that are present in the data. Also, the fact that they process such amounts of data and go through millions and billions of computations in such a way that regardless of intellectual property, they are not necessarily understood by humans. Is the so-called black box problem that creates a situation in which people that are using the AI tools and that are affected by the use of these AI tools cannot really pinpoint what kind of data points were relevant in making the decision, the output, and what processes were behind it. And then, of course, other issues that were here highlighted that we explain under the terms of invisibility, scalability, and autonomy, in that AI systems are often used in a way that is invisible to society at large in the law enforcement context, even sometimes in the law enforcement itself. So maybe some law enforcement officers are not aware that they are interacting with artificial intelligence when it is being used. They may have a direct impact on the real world if they are autonomous, and we highlight that this should not happen in the law enforcement context, that there shouldn't be autonomously acting systems, and that any impact or any error in an AI system, given its potential to be scalable and to act in such a in a faster and broader scale, can create more harm than human errors may in certain instances. So these are the kind of explanations we provide in our AI toolkit regarding the challenges associated with the characteristics of artificial intelligence. And we highlight the importance of keeping to what we call the principles for responsible AI innovation in order to tackle these challenges. And we go beyond principles and we present practical tools to support self-assessing the risk of AI systems, the readiness of law enforcement agencies to interact with AI systems in a responsible manner through their organizational culture, people and expertise, and processes. And we highlight, for example, the importance of transparency, of explainability of these AI systems, the importance of fairness, and essentially that ultimately all the decisions have to be taken by humans, and they can't view AI systems as replacing, or officers can't view AI systems as replacing them in decision making, but only as supportive tools. And regarding your second part of your question of whether we have already in place the mechanisms for human rights protection, the AI toolkit builds on international human rights law and puts forward the principle of lawfulness as the backbone and the basis of all the other principles and all the other actions. Naturally, like in everything that law enforcement officers and agencies do, they are obliged to comply with the law and with human rights law, and we stress the importance of that. The enforceability is obviously depending on countries, and there's many challenges therein, but international human rights law offers already a robust framework that allows human rights to be protected and to these issues to be analyzed in the human rights lens. Naturally, now, as we evolve in governance and regulation of these AI systems, we will uncover and perhaps build, countries will start building national and regional frameworks that are a little bit more specific into interpreting what are the limits within human rights law to utilize these systems in a way that protects citizens.
Thank you, Ines. Yes, there is a robust international human rights legal framework that deals with these issues. But through my work with different governments and in different countries, I see a lot of discrepancy in implementing these international human rights principles into the national law. Sometimes, we need to work on capacity building, law enforcement, also other stakeholders in the justice system, such as judges, so they understand this international human rights legal framework, and then they implement it, even if there are national legal provisions that deal with these issues. So a lot of work to be done in this respect, and I would like to now call out Nishit. Nishit, your experience as a cyber law expert in India is invaluable. What are some of the trends that you see in India regarding these challenges that were discussed by the previous panelists of using AI systems by law enforcement agencies, and how are Indian justice system stakeholders dealing with these issues, if at all? Thank you.
Yeah. The other important part is that we have that Jack has covered that the data part also. So I will also cover that part that we have some issues regarding open source intelligence tools with AI. So the data they are gathering, it can be a disinformation. What about the accuracy, credibility, reliability of that power and confidential and classified data? A very important example is like cyber agent technology. So one of the most concrete applications that cyber agent technology area is chatbot. So called Sweetie. You may have heard about Sweetie, that the chatbot is designed to look like a 10-year-old girl from Philippines and can have conversations online with people that show sexual interest in children. The goal obviously is to track the identity of pedophiles and to prosecute or rebuke them. So this technology can be used by secret services and intelligence agencies in the interest of the national security also. But the challenge is that technology cannot provoke illegal behavior and should not learn and adopt criminal behavior itself. So that's the important part as far as law enforcement is concerned. So they must aware about the how criminals use these type of technology, how deepfakes work. Another AI technology can impact law enforcement, use of video evidence for investigation, prosecution, and what steps can be taken to prepare for future where the authenticity and reliability of every video or evidence in any trial in question. So as far as India is concerned, yes, we have recent law in by the Ministry of Electronics Information Technology, and it has been clarified by the ministry again on 15th March 2024 that there is no the new advisory abolishes the need for intermediaries to obtain explicit government permission before deploying any AI models. So now they have to emphasize on transparency of if they are using any AI model, that content moderation and bias prevention. Then we have consent mechanism also, and deepfake identification. So means they have to adopt measures such as labeling and embedding unique metadata to identify artificial generated content. So it's very important. Even recently, honorable Supreme Court, they are also using like Supace. We have like Supreme Court portal for assistance in code efficiency. We have Supreme Court Vidik Anuvad software archives. We have fast and secure transmission of electronic records, a software to transmit court orders swiftly, securely through electronic mode. And we have other part also. And today, digital accessibility information communication training was provided by e-committee of the Honorable Supreme Court for visually challenged judicial officers. That's very important. And court staff for regarding the purpose to use artificial intelligence technology for the visually impaired in office handling purposes, how documentation, note taking, and judgment search with AI-based assistive technology. So we have adopted so many tools and technology in India also. The Supreme Court also has signed a memorandum of understanding with the IIT Madras for collaborating on using artificial intelligence and emerging technologies for transcription tools, summarization of page transcript, translation tools, exclusive streaming platform for court trials, process automation, and large language models also. So, but as far as ethical concerns are concerned, there are so many challenges as other panelists have covered, like bias in training data, lack of transparency, privacy concerns, lack of regulation, human oversight is very important. The most important part as a defense lawyer, it means mostly judges are also attending this session. The Dobbert and Fry standard principle we are adopting. So in AI technology, the most important part is the first question presented by Dobbert might be directed to identifying the theory or technique or component that is subject to evaluation. Is it the sensors that fed data to the AI system, the algorithm? The question is the algorithm, the math behind the algorithm, the dataset used to train the algorithm, the training methodology, or is it system as an integrated whole that is subject to review? So the important part is the Daubert principles. We are following these laws as far as digital forensics is concerned. Another, the major part is also regarding digital forensics part also. So we have so many challenges regarding how to identify and how again to go before the court. It can be automated evidence processing, malware detection analysis. We have anomaly detection softwares. We have file carving and data recovery. Then we have digital image and video analysis and predictive analysis and case prioritization. That's very important part. So we have three parts also, the challenges regarding technical, legal, and ethical. So lastly, if want to cover this part means for courts, yes, we require truly trustworthy AI ecosystem, and need of R is the development of AI-based tools that allow compliance with all laws and regulations and with ethical principles and offering a more robust and reliable solution from a both technical and social perspective, upholding evidence integrity, respecting privacy, and ensuring fairness are paramount. So that's my take.
Thank you, Nishit. And I have just one now general question to all for all the panelists. Based on your presentations and the discussion that we have, you accentuate and you all say that AI is not invented by governments and government agencies. They have to collaborate with the private sector, right? So when we regulate, we need to strike a balance between fostering innovation, AI, the AI sector, private sector on the one hand, and then also regulating the use of AI by law enforcement. And how do we strike these balance? Okay, so how do we what are the mechanisms? So I heard some of you mentioned labeling, certification. A lot of you also mentioned self-regulation mechanisms, right? So the government needs to work with the private sector. That is the biggest catalyst behind AI innovation. And we need AI. All of us use generative AI, but I think that the most important thing is to focus on capacity building and understanding what the challenges are. And also, some of you mentioned that we need to take into consideration the whole life cycle of AI, right? So AI is not a static technology; it feeds on data, and as it feeds on data, it changes. Okay, so the system, the model changes. So how do we strike this balance between innovation, so not stifling innovation of the AI sector, but on the other hand, regulating so we protect these international human rights, fundamental human rights that are protected by international law. Over to you.
I could go. I could say I agree with you, Miriam. AI has huge value, including for law enforcement, and we want to use AI. But when it has to do with the lives of individuals, especially for a lot of minority groups who know fully well that technology does not treat them in the same way, they need to be more wary. So I think it's okay to say, yes, we see the value. We don't talk a lot about the good use of AI in law enforcement for things like probabilistic genotyping. In over 7 jurisdictions, we've seen that AI can identify fingerprints better. Even when several people have touched the device, AI can help us specify who specifically used the device at what time, and that could help identify an individual than in the past where we would just be like conflicted or throw such evidence away. We've seen AI used in data analysis. So where you have huge volumes of data, AI can help you navigate it to what information you might need. It has also helped in terms of like suspect identification or automated reporting. So I think AI around operational effectiveness matters a lot. But when AI would go into things like sentencing or go into things like predictive policing, then that's where, like we begin to have a lot of problems with it. So AI does have its value and we want to use AI, but we must think about the guardrails around what areas we want to use it for. Secondly, let's not act like we don't have the laws or principles, that we need new laws, new principles. No. Like Ines mentioned, we already have international human rights standards. And interestingly, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights puts the responsibility to respect international human rights law on these companies, on these industries, that they have a role to play to ensure that human rights are respected. The reason why we all talk about a human rights framework is that we see the value for companies and AI developers to use human rights impact assessment, to adjudicate the impact of the technology. We don't assume that they know the implications, but at least if they've conducted some human rights impact assessment, that would help the approach to it. I'm not so much of a lover of the risk-based approach. I'm more of a human rights-based approach because we know human rights give us a common language to frame what the harms are. So when we talk about bias and discrimination, we have clear parameters within international human rights law. We have specific legal principles to address issues of bias, to address issues of discrimination. And of course, human rights gives us a non-techno intervention, like we can think about non-techno interventions to ensure how inclusive our design process, how inclusive are our law enforcement processes. And so it's not safe to say, oh, we need to create new rules. We can use existing rules in law to guide UNESCO has provided one of the best, highly signed international principles on how to use ethical ways of deploying artificial intelligence. Like Inez mentioned, there's tools and standards that also sort of exist. But the last thing I would say is judges can actually use existing law to protect rights, even with this range of AI. Miriam, you said we don't know how the technology will go and all, and so we've seen how judges have used existing legal principles like the unconscionability doctrine, or to say, hey, there's no rule around AI, but we've seen courts say we give an order for data deletion, we give an order for data minimization, or we notice that individuals or citizens, there was a lack of informed consent. This is unfair on this minority group. So we don't have to create new laws. We can think of how do we enforce the right for individuals to challenge bias of these systems. So the last thing I would say is we need more avenues for law enforcement to speak with social groups, to speak with industry makers, to speak with civil society actors, to speak with UNESCO as well. How can we come together to constantly iterate the ways that we would govern artificial intelligence without using them just because they work or just because they make their jobs easier?
Thank you, Jake. Any other panelists would like to comment on this, or I have questions from the audience? So please let me know.
Maybe
Sebastian.
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, first, let me say that I fully agree with what Jake just said. Let me just add one thing very quickly. One of the most serious problems that we have with these kinds of AI systems is one of incentives, right? Basically, those who are developing these systems get all the proceeds, and all of the costs are externalized, suffering with predictive policing, etc. This is something that clearly can be seen as if this thing that says that it can define or that it can identify a suspect in a crime, the person who's going to suffer from the development of this technology is this person, right? So there's a really imbalance between the incentives. And this is perhaps something that we could leverage. I'm not saying that it's simple, and I certainly don't have any concrete solution in mind, but this is really one of the problems, is the person who's suffering the pain isn't the person who's getting all the money. That's just one of the things I wanted to say, but now let's leave it open for questions from others.
Thank you.
If I may just quickly come in. Indeed, I again agree with all of that has been said by Jake and Sebastian, and just building on Sebastian's last point. And overall, the idea of responsible AI innovation is also one of empowering law enforcement agencies in their technical capabilities, which I believe is a very important step towards the responsible use of these tools. And more and more, these tools will also be developed. There's already a law enforcement agencies developing their own AI tools internally, and that might happen more and more, or in partnerships with the private sector, with universities, with NGOs in the crime abuse and the child abuse and exploitation area. There's a lot of actors that are not companies, for example, that are developing these AI tools. And as AI technology evolves and the field evolves, the threshold to develop this system is lower, and there may be more capabilities to develop it in-house. But naturally, if the officers, the agencies purchasing these tools have sufficient knowledge of what they are acquiring, like they have of guns and other types of technology that they are buying for their work, they're naturally much more equipped to understand if the system they're buying was built with data that is relevant for their sector, that was lawfully and legally collected, for example. And naturally, having third-party certifications and testing would support this type of decision-making and evaluation. And also, if there's an obligation for the technical providers to provide some information on this kind of disclose the type of data that was used to train the algorithm and the purpose or the ideal purpose for which it will be used, it would also be very important to do this balance of promoting innovation while also safeguarding rights.
Thank you, Ines. If no further remarks, I would like to read a question from Nishit Yes, would you like to
Yeah,
comment briefly?
yes,
Yes.
only, yeah, mostly have been covered, but lastly, that AI is in a subordinate position, you can say, only assisting the honorable judge to handle the case. The judge is the key and the core of the trial work. That's very important. We have to understand.
Thank you. Thank you. The principle of human in the loop is really important, and we should all, adhere to this principle, especially in design and deployment of AI in law enforcement settings. So I have a very interesting question here that I would like to read. In complex court cases, in addition to applying the law, judges must consider a variety of social, cultural, and economic aspects to reach a just decision, right? And Sebastian mentioned the circumstances in Argentina and Buenos Aires. So is it feasible that AI could replace this human reasoning that judges employ in their pursuit of the ideal of justice and material truth? It's a complicated question, but interesting, philosophical. Yes, Sebastian, please.
Yes, that's a pretty philosophical question indeed. I agree. I can't say no out of hand, but I could say something like this. The progress that we're seeing in AI over the past few years have demonstrated that things that I said would never be possible have turned out to be true. So never say never, right? So I would be skeptical about any sort of automated intervention in a judge's decision making. But I'm all the more cautious with each passing day about saying what's possible and what's impossible when it comes to AI.
Yes, true. Anyone else would like to comment on this? Ines?
Yes, I mean, I'll agree with Sebastian's overview that, skeptical, but we never know how society evolves. However, I would like to just point out that from a human rights perspective, that wouldn't be allowed. These kind of decisions have to lay in humans, and for multiple reasons, including that humans are accountable and we can understand more or less how humans come to decisions. So I would just like to make that point.
Thank you. I have another question. Do we have some instances of use of AI in any judicial system for handing down judicial opinions? If so, what ethical safeguards are being put in place to ensure responsible use of AI in the criminal justice system?
But so in some part of the US, and I think in Canada as well, some judges have been able to use AI to help summarize. And we've seen organizations, some NGOs have said that because of AI tools like ChatGPT, they can take voluminous legal information that contain a lot of high legalese to transcribe them in very simplistic language. We've seen the use of natural language processing in South Africa, where people who don't understand English language, because a lot of courts in some colonized or previously colonized countries are still using like English as the standard language. And so courts do not have translations of those languages in like indigenous languages. My country, there are over 350 languages. And so therefore, there are people who said, oh, because of these AI tools, they can now take this very complex legal information in English. They can transcribe them to local information. They can make it simpler. And so in the course of my work, working with a couple of startups, we've seen how they can use some of this technology to help bridge the gap between people who are not very educated. So yes, there is the opportunity to use that to sort of hand down complex legal cases and also help with reporting as well. Sorry for the distraction in the background.
Yeah. May I? Yes. So in India, recently in one of the judgment, honorable court not commented on that part, but yes, they raised the question with the ChatGPT, like what is the jurisprudence on bail when the assailant assaulted with cruelty? So response of ChatGPT was the jurisprudence on bail for cases where the assailants have assaulted with cruelty will depend on the specific circumstances of the case and the laws and the regulation of the jurisdiction where the case is being tried. However, in general, if the assailants have been charged with a violent crime that involves cruelty, such as murder, aggravated assault, or torture, they may be considered a danger to the community and a flight risk. So it is important to note that the presumption of innocence is a fundamental principle of the justice system, and all defendants are entitled to bail unless there are compelling reasons to deny it. Therefore, even in cases where the assailants have assaulted with cruelty, they may still be granted bail if the judge determines that they do not pose a risk to the community or a flight risk. So that was commented by Honorable Judge. Also, they used, but after all, it's only Honorable Court's discretion to grant bail or not. So that was used by an Indian court.
Sorry, if I could just add before I was distracted. I was going to say, with how phenomenal AI systems have become, let's not forget that it's still a technology and it's a very imperfect technology. And so I think we'll begin to grapple with how can a technology be so exceptional, so good? How can it be so wrong? And it is possible because the same way we can use it to help, like hand out legal reporting, help judges simplify their processes, it could also be it could go completely south and just be completely negative. And we've seen it to do so well for a lot of people, but not so well for people who are Black, brown, and colored. And so we must constantly interrogate that as we see this huge sophistication in predicting behavior, in optimizing resource allocation, in helping law enforcement, there must be a constant reminder that this phenomenal technology can also be completely reversed on the other side. And I think if we constantly remind ourselves with that, that would help. But also the ability to create tools like watermarking in the US, where you said, this is generated by an AI system. The more we use AI, the more we forget sometimes that these tools are being used and we assume people know. But we must remind people that, oh, this is an AI system. It's not a human being. It's not perfect. It could, I don't like to say it, but it could hallucinate or, whatever. But these are things we must constantly remind ourselves to ensure that there's that equitable representation and people have their freedom of information respected and valued. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment on this? Or I have another question for the panel. How facial recognition technologies are going side by side with the human rights laws to not accrue violations to the personal life of citizens of less developed countries. So, it's one thing to talk about, countries such as the United States or Canada or other countries, but where the countries of the global South or the global majority. How are there some international actions that have been taken to protect the worldwide citizens from this kind of violation of data? Sebastian?
Thank you very much. The Observatory of Tech Law launched the case I talked about before against the city of Buenos Aires. And in fact, in Argentina, one of the problems we are facing is that these technologies could be in the hands of governments that sometimes change abruptly. So there is a very fast change in government, and there are some governments that do not fully respect human rights and who could apply sanctions to specific people, making use and abusing these types of technologies. So I think that these technologies already pose a great risk by their mere existence, but the fact that one political party, for example, could use it and then the next political party could continue to use it when they reach power and abuse the system is something very common in Argentina. We are deeply worried about this. In my opinion, this is not the solution, but it is a problem we are facing because we are a developing country. So we always try to defend human rights, and we launch these cases before the courts because we think that we have to only use these technologies with the safeguards in any country, obviously, and that these technologies should not be in the hands of a government that could change very rapidly.
And I would let those words resonate here. I think that that's very important. And unless other panelists have something else to say, I'm just going to wrap up here. I think what you highlighted, Sebastian, is really important, and we need consistency. So consumers, data subjects, people need citizens need consistency. And that's the most important thing. So having digital safeguards and procedures and having capacity building, organizing capacity building with different justice sector stakeholders is really important. And, just educating prosecutors, judges, law enforcement stakeholders about the importance of, rights respecting environments in deployment of AI in law enforcement settings is really important. And as we draw our webinar to close, I would like to take a moment to summarize some of the key points and valuable insights we have gained today. So we discussed various use cases, very interesting, of AI in law enforcement, highlighting both the opportunities and the challenges from ethical, human rights, and risk perspective. Our experts shared examples from different regions and legal systems, showing the diverse applications and implications of AI technologies, but the risks and the challenges are the same. And we also explored the balance between innovation and regulation and the role of international cooperation in governing the use of AI in law enforcement. Thank you to all of you, to the panelists, to the organizers, and to the audience, especially for the active participation and thoughtful questions for the panelists. Your engagement is essential to advancing the dialogue on these critical issues. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, for a great facilitation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
All the
Prateek.
best.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for successful event to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Irakli. Thank you, Prateek.